morning. This is The Way to a Wonderful Life. Please know with me now, right now, there is a power within you that can lift your life to its highest level. It can change illness into health. It can bring peace amidst turmoil. It can bring success out of failure and victory out of defeat. It can bring companionship and happiness out of loneliness. It responds to you. For this is the power that dwells within you, and so it is. Amen. Thank you for joining me this morning for The Way to a Wonderful Life. I am Reverend Dr. Henry Lee Bates, coming to you live from Palm Springs, California this morning, teaching from the philosophy of the Mastermind Jesus and the wisdom of the ancients found in the evolutionary science of mind. For more information about this ministry, please visit www.revbates.tv or www.revbatesontheradio.org. You can also find me on youtube.com by going to youtube.com and putting in the search box The Way to a Wonderful Life channel. That's The Way to a Wonderful Life channel, where you'll find over 90 of my radio broadcasts that you can listen to 24/7 in both English and Spanish. You can also go to MSN, Yahoo, Bing, and Google and put in the search box Reverend Henry Bates, that's B-A-T-E-S, and you'll find everything you want to find out about this ministry. Now, this is a healing and teaching ministry where we go beyond religion and we follow the Mastermind Jesus and believing in our prayer and the answer to it, for we believe and we know that God responds to us by corresponding to that which we believe to be true for us. And so each and every one of us have that opportunity today to take into our mind a greater idea about the life that God has prepared for us and to accept the good that is ours. And as we do that this morning, let's accept the good for all those on the East Coast who have endured all the conditions of Hurricane Sandy on the east coast of the U.S. and beyond, and let's pray for them and know that just as God strengthens us to move through whatever it is that we must move through, that God is giving them the strength, giving them the ideas, giving them the solutions that are necessary for them to rebuild their lives. I've heard from so many people on the East Coast, and they're telling me that it was not as bad as they thought it would be, and they feel that encouragement. One of those was Mario Leone from Connecticut, who's telling me that everything is back and he's so grateful. And each and every one of these people that I've heard from feel that gratitude and that knowing that with God all things are possible as we open our mind to the infinite good, and we know that we can accept in our own mind, our own heart, and our own soul that there is no greater God in the hereafter than there is in the here and now. And so we bless all those who are going through this hurricane. We give them our prayers, and for those of us who can, we make a donation to the American Red Cross in support of each and every one of them. Once again, this is The Way to a Wonderful Life. You can send me your prayer requests, your questions, your comments about this program, and you can send a faith offering, a donation, or a tithe to this ministry, and you can do that from the website revbates.tv or revbatesontheradio.org, or you can mail those to Reverend Henry Bates, that's B-A-T-E-S, P.O. Box 1173, Palm Springs, California, 92263. Once again, that's P.O. Box 1173, Palm Springs, California, 92263. And you can leave me a message in the Los Angeles area at 818-476-0088 or in Palm Springs at 760-778-5677. Once again, this is A Way to a Wonderful Life, and our Way to a Wonderful Life message for today is not just some, but everybody. Not just some, but everybody. And we're going to start with some words from the great Charles Fillmore from his book Prosperity, and we're going to find out just exactly what the Mastermind Jesus was giving us to move us through whatever it is that we're going through, so that we can realize that abundant life. As Jesus said, I have come to tell you that you may have life and you may have it more abundantly. But we must follow Jesus. We must follow Jesus and not the opinions of man in order to do it. Jesus said that when we come to the altar to make an offering, we should have nothing in our heart against our brother. He said that before we can make contact with the love and power of God, we must first make peace with our brother. This means that we must cultivate a love for our fellows in order to set the attractive force of love into operation. All we need to do is quicken our love for others by thinking about love and casting out of our mind all hate and fear that would weaken the perfect working of that mighty magnet. As love attracts, hate dissipates. Before you approach God's altar of plenty, go and make friends with your brother man. Your business is to get what belongs to you, and you do that by thinking about the omnipresent substance of God and how you can lay hold of it through love. Get in touch with God, riches, and spirit. Lay hold of them by love, and you will have sufficient for every day. Love, therefore, is the fulfillment of the law. Love, therefore, is a fulfillment of the law. And that's from the great Charles Fillmore. Jesus raised the bar of love so high that only those who daily choose to make love a part of their life experience will ever find unity with what he was teaching. But once we unify with the profound love that Jesus saw as the most important attribute of the Spirit to be expressed through us and as us, the kingdom of heaven of our choosing will be made manifest in our life experiences. The mastermind Jesus was very clear on the way in which we must establish love in our consciousness. Let's go to Matthew 5:43 from the Holy Bible. You have heard it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons and daughters of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And from these words we can realize that Jesus was attempting to teach people of the Jewish faith who had little education. Yet in these simple words that he used, his audience could be impressed with this new concept of love that calls us to go deep within our heart and our mind to choose to love everyone. Tax collectors were especially disliked by the people Jesus was talking to, but he was telling them that no matter how horribly difficult, love was absolutely necessary and essential in order to realize our oneness with God and attract the good that we desire to experience. Jesus' teachings on love are in spiritual alignment with the law of attraction, the law of cause and effect, or as he defined it, the law of sowing and reaping. The law of sowing and reaping. What he was teaching in these simple words is a universal law and an eternal one, changeless and absolute. Most of us do not hold any hate towards anyone, and most of us do not have what we consider enemies. But there is much hate and a great belief in enemies in the collective consciousness, and so we must eliminate that part of this negative collective consciousness from our own consciousness that is being imposed upon us. We must eliminate it from our mind, from our heart, and from our soul, and this is what the mastermind Jesus was referring to when he stated, be in the world, but not of the world. Be in the world, but not of the world. The world has invented many things that separate us from God and the good and from each other. These things we must consciously reject in order to not be influenced by them immediately when they come to our attention. I cannot stress this enough, for as Charles Fillmore writes, before we can make contact with the love and the power of God, we must first make peace with our brother. We must first make peace with our brother. This means that we must choose to foster in our mind a greater measure of unconditional love than what is evidenced in the world. In the world, we have separated each other by race, by nationality, by sexual orientation, by legal and illegal, by vegan and meat eaters, by lighter or darker skin color, by a myriad of religions, by political party, and the list goes on. All of these labels that the world has created causes us to be blind to the truth that we are all a part of God, that no matter what we may appear to be, we are spirit having a human experience. God expressing in form, the living Spirit of God lives in each and every one of us. It is that image and likeness that we read about in the book of Genesis. Whenever we see someone as inferior or even superior, we are judging according to the world, and God is neither superior nor inferior, no matter what label the world may have invented to define us. Jesus referred to tax collectors and Gentiles in his word to those who he was teaching, knowing that these words triggered that something within them towards the negative. Politicians and religious leaders use the same technique today to get people's attention, and all too often their support. But their agendas, unlike that of Jesus, is to take advantage of the hate and the divisiveness rather than to heal it. Negative judgments against people is toxic to our consciousness, and it's toxic to the world in which we live. Not only does it affect us mentally and emotionally, it affects our physical health as well as our prosperity and our success. So many times we find in our world that something that people want to draw us to that negates the good that God is in all people that we see and every living thing that we see. We know that there's a sacred contract, a sacred agreement with God that each and every one of us knows about on a deeper level of our mind, our heart, and our soul. We know that God is. We know that God is a part of who we are. We know that God is a spirit. Just as Jesus said, the Father is a spirit and must be worshipped in spirit and in truth. And so we know that that image, likeness of God within each and every one of us is part of God's power, part of God's spirit, and part of God's intelligence. And no matter what the world may define us as being, that remains the truth for each and every one of us throughout eternity. Now, this past week, I got 6 calls from ministers and rabbis and priests across the country. I had a minister and a rabbi from Chicago call me and left a message. None of these people reached me by phone, and it's a good thing they did, because it would have stirred up the devil in me. I'm going to tell you right now, because they're telling me how to vote. They're telling me how to put my thoughts into the ballot box. And I'm going to tell you that we must vote. We must vote our conscience, whatever our conscience may be, whatever our conscience is. I believe that as we follow Jesus, we follow the path of love and compassion. We follow the path of doing unto others as we would have others do unto us. When we follow Jesus, we realize that every one of us has the opportunity every day to share a part of who we are, the spirit within us, with everybody around us, that God has created an abundant universe, that there's enough for all of us to share and to spare. And there is no comfort. There is no comfort in having a lot, having wealth, having abundance, if we see people in poverty around us and in need and in ill health. God has created this beautiful, magnificent universe in which we can live, and we can live more abundantly and more joyously and a greater feeling of living a wonderful life, a healthy and happy and a wholesome life when we take our mind off the things of the world and put our mind on God. And as Jesus said, those who follow me must follow me in spirit and in truth. Those who follow Jesus must follow him in spirit and in truth, and realize that what we deny anyone else, we deny for ourselves. Whatever it is that we withhold from someone else, we withhold from ourselves. If we want to have the fullness of life, the fullness of joy, the fullness of health, and the fullness of happiness, then we must do unto others as we would have them do unto us. As Jesus said, those first two commandments are the most powerful commandments that we can take into our mind as we go throughout our life experience. Love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and that means give God your attention. And equally important, he said, is to love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, don't deny something for your neighbor that you would want for yourself. Don't deny your neighbor their good. Don't deny your neighbor their dignity if that is something you want to have for yourself. This November 6th, 2012, there are ballots in 3 states, Washington, Maine, and Maryland, on the issue of same-sex marriage, to legalize or ban the right of gay and lesbian people to get married, to share their life with the person they love. For some people, their vote will be based on their religious beliefs, but these religious beliefs are the opinions of man, not of God. In truth, they deny the law of God given to us by the mastermind Jesus, which is to make love our sacred ideal. And Jesus said, "Follow me." He did not say that it would always be easy, nor did he say it would always be popular. He said that I am the way, the life, and the truth. And this I am he was referring to was the love that must guide us in all that we do. God is love and is the impulse within us to do unto others as we would have them do unto us. I cannot think of anything constructive or beneficial to anyone personally or to the world in which we live that can come from denying someone the right to marry the person they love. I cannot imagine anyone thinking that they have the right to impose on someone else's liberty and freedom something they would not want imposed upon them. I can recall incidents in the past in my life when people were against interracial marriage. There were those strongly opposed to it, and there were those uncomfortable with it. And there were those who knew that this opposition and uncomfortableness was something that we must heal, and in doing so, our world becomes a better place for all of us. And right now, we have a president of the United States who came as a result of interracial marriage. Our president, President Obama, is the result of an interracial marriage. And look how powerful he has made our country. And there are those who knew, as I said, that this opposition and uncomfortableness was something that we must heal, and in doing so, our world becomes a better place for all of us. These were the people who understood that Jesus' instruction to love one another is a truth that can set us all free. For as we sow freedom for others, we shall reap a greater freedom in our own life experience. So let's go back and let's look at those words from Matthew 5:43 one more time. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Hate is insidious. Hate is insidious. It's also something that holds prejudice and racism, bigotry and homophobia, anti-Semitism. It is something that hate is a word, a 4-letter word that can destroy our lives, destroy our health, and destroy the joy that we find in the world around us and within our own heart and mind and soul. That's why Jesus was telling us that. But I say to you, he said, now let's follow Jesus. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons and daughters of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the infidels do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? And do not even the Gentiles, she said, he was speaking to a Jewish audience, do the same. You therefore must be be perfect. In other words, we must perfect that thing within us that holds love as our sacred ideal in all things, and follow Jesus in understanding that that love is the power. That love is the power that attracts to us that good life, that wonderful life, that joyful life, and that abundant life. Jesus said, I have come to tell you that you may have life and you may have it more abundantly, but you won't have it if you remain in the consciousness of the world and listen to the noise and the nonsense of the world that separates us first from each other and then separates us from God. Eric Butterworth writes in his book, The Universe is Calling, we don't discover God in our worship in the church. We uncover God in ourselves, even if by the inspiration of what we hear in church. But the important thing is we do not leave God there in the sanctuary. We take God with us, and he will be with us in the street, in our home, in our work, and in every activity of our life. Discover God's presence. God is an allness in which we exist as an eachness. God is not in us in the same sense that a raisin is in a bun. For the raisin is still a raisin and the bun is still a bun. That is not unity. God is in us as the ocean is to a wave. The wave is nothing more or less than the ocean expressing as a wave. And each and every one of us are expressing the life of God, the joy of God, the truth of God, the power of God, the Spirit of God, and the intelligence of God to the level that we bring it into our awareness every day of our life. And that's why we read in the Scriptures to pray without ceasing. Pray without ceasing. That sacred ideal of love is the ideal that we hold in all that we do. Even when we vote, even when we go into that secret ballot place, we know that God is present with us, that love is still the power that shall rule and remain dominant and reign supreme in all things that we do, and we must take that into consideration in all that we do. Father, you heareth me always, Jesus said, so we know that everything that we do is a sowing and reaping in our mind, our heart, and our soul, and that we shall reap the good rewards of that holding steady, holding faithful to that sacred ideal of love in all things, even when it's not popular, even when it's outside of what the world tells us is the truth. So let's know and let's believe the truth that Jesus gave us. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. And he went one step further, and he said, you too are the light of the world. And he said, to let your light so shine. And that light is infused with love. That light within you and me is infused with the power of love. That light within Jesus is so powerful that each and every one of us can find it and discover it within our own self, within a measure of our own being, if we just seek to discover it. So let's do all that we do with love. Let's do all that we do with compassion. Let's do all that we do as a fellowship with the mastermind Jesus today and every day. Each and every one of us have that opportunity to discover God within our own self. Let's go back to Eric Butterworth, who's one of the greatest teachers of spiritual truth in this last century. He wrote, we do not discover God in the worship in our church. We uncover God in ourselves, even if by the inspiration of what we have learned in church. But the important thing is we do not leave God there in the sanctuary. We do not leave God. We're not the Sunday morning God people. We take God with us, and he will be with us in the street, in our home, and in our work, and every activity of our life. We can discover God's presence through recognition and identification that God is an allness in which we exist as an eachness. God is not in us in the same sense that a raisin is in a bun, for the raisin is still a raisin and the bun is still a bun. This is not unity. God is in us as the ocean is in a wave. All the qualities and attributes of the living Spirit of God is in each and every one of us. The wave is nothing more nor less than the ocean expressing as a wave, than the ocean expressing as a wave. And that's why the mastermind Jesus said, you are the light of the world. Let your light so shine, because when you do, you are glorifying God in all that you do. You are standing up and speaking up for the absolute truth that God is a God of love, that God has an everlasting love for each and every one of us, no matter how the world may define us, no matter how the world may see us. God has an everlasting love for us, and as we unify with that ideal of sacred love being that thing that we choose to define ourselves and choose to use it as a foundation for every choice and decision that we make, we shall know as Jesus did, that when we love God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind, and equally important, as we love our neighbor as ourselves, we too shall enjoy the abundant life, the joyful life, and the wonderful life. The mastermind Jesus taught that the way in which we show our love for God is to choose love above all else, to love our neighbor as ourselves, for in truth, God and love are synonymous. We aren't called just to love some, but everybody, those we like, those we tolerate, those who offend us, and those who hate us, and those we adore. Not just some, but everybody, everybody. Let's go back, and we're going to end this with those powerful words from Charles Fillmore from his classic book, Prosperity. Jesus said that when we come to the altar to make an offering, we should have nothing in our heart against our brother. He said that before we can make contact with the love and the power of God, we must first make peace with our brother. This means that we must cultivate a love for our fellows in order to set the attractive force of love into operation in our lives. All we need to do is quicken our love for others by thinking about love and casting out of our mind all hate and fear that would weaken the perfect working of that mighty magnet. As love attracts, hate dissipates. Before we approach God's altar of plenty, go and make friends with your brother man. Your business is to get what belongs to you, and you do that by thinking about the omnipresent substance of God and how you can lay hold of it through the power of love. Get in touch with God's riches and spirit. Lay hold of them by love, and you will have sufficient for every day. Love, therefore, is a fulfillment of the law, and that's from the great Charles Fillmore from his classic book, Prosperity. And all he's doing is telling us, restating those words of Jesus. You have heard it that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say unto you, Jesus said, I say unto you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons and daughters of the Most High God right now, right where you are. Once again, I want to thank you for being with me today. It's been my great pleasure to have you, and I hope you join me for my next broadcast right here on KTYM AM 1460 radio and at www.ktym.com. And you can find my full radio schedule by going to revbates.tv or revbatesontheradio.org, and you can also go to youtube.com, where you'll find over 90 of my radio broadcasts that you can listen to 24/7 in both English and Spanish. You can also go to MSN, Yahoo, Bing, and Google and put in the search box Reverend Henry Bates, that's Bates, and you'll find everything you want to find out about this ministry. Now, you can send me your questions, your comments, you can send me your prayer requests, and you can do that from the website revbates.tv or revbatesontheradio.org, and you can send that donation, faith offering, or tithe using the PayPal secure payment system with your ATM card, your credit card, or your checking account. You can also send those to me by U.S. mail to Reverend Henry Bates, that's Bates, P.O. Box 1173, P.O. Box 1173, Palm Springs, California, 92263. And you can leave me a telephone message in Los Angeles at 818-476-0088, or in Palm Springs at 760-778-5622. 5677. Once again, this has been The Way to a Wonderful Life, where we realize and we know that as we follow the teachings of Jesus, as we start realizing consciously every day that in him we live and move and have our being, and that we can do all things through Christ which strengthens us. And as we recognize that we are part of the Spirit of God, we are part of the power of God, and we are part of the intelligence of God, that image and likeness of God that's imparted to us, that we read about in the way back in the book of Genesis, is but the truth for each and every one of us. And so we know and we believe and we accept that it will always be the truth for us. So as the Mastermind Jesus said, let your light so shine. And so each and every one of us today and every day, including Election Day, November 6th, let's let the light of love shine through our heart, our mind, and our soul. And no matter what it is that we do, let's make love that sacred ideal that guides us and directs us into every activity and everything we do today and every day, so that we can realize, as Jesus did, that we can have that abundant life, that God does give us each day our daily bread, and that daily bread symbolizes that God will heal us, prosper us, and bless us in all things. And we can say, it with the fullness of faith and the fullness of joy, that today is the day the Lord hath made, and I rejoice and give thanks for it right now, right where I am. And so it is. Amen.